Hello and welcome to this very special episode of Frankly Speaking, and I'm joined by none other than the Nostradamus of American elections, Allan Lichtman, a man who has predicted 9 out of 10 last presidential elections correctly. Am I right on that number?
I would say 10 out of 10.
10 out of 10.
Because I correctly predicted Gore in 2000, even though the Supreme Court gave the election to Bush. I proved in my report to the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights that based on the intent of Florida voters, Gore should have won Florida and the presidency. But we're not here to relitigate 2000, are we?
10 on 10 elections being predicted rightly.
Correct.
Well, to begin with, I would say that I extend to you a warm welcome to India, because we need a lot of help in predicting the Indian elections, which most pollsters get wrong. So,
oh, yeah, the pollsters get the U.S. elections wrong, too. They all got 2016 wrong. I got it right. I predicted Donald Trump, which did not make me very popular here in Washington, D.C., 90% plus Democratic, where I teach at American University.
But Allan, you are a history professor at the American University. You are a participant in the Senior Olympics. And where did you get this interest in predicting elections, and how do you make the scientific basis for this?
You know, I'd love to tell you I came across the keys to the White House by ruining my eyes in the archives and deep thinking. But if I were to tell you that, to quote the late, not so great Richard Nixon, that would be wrong. I came across the keys largely by accident in 1981 when I was a distinguished visiting scholar at the California Institute of Technology near Los Angeles. And there I met the world's leading authority on pattern recognition and earthquake prediction, Vladimir Kailas Borak from Moscow. And it was his idea that we become the odd couple of political research, combining his expertise in pattern recognition with my knowledge of American history and politics. And so we reconceptualize presidential elections in earthquake terms. Remember, this is 1981, so not as Carter versus Reagan or Republican versus Democrat, but as stability. The White House party stays in power. Earthquake, the White House party is booted out. And with that in mind, we looked at every American presidential election, from the horse and buggy days of politics, the election of Abraham Lincoln in 1860 to the election of Ronald Reagan in 1980. And we used Kailas Borak's method of pattern recognition to figure out what patterns in the political environment could separate stability from earthquake. And that led to the scientific discovery of the 13 keys to the White House.
Yes, the 13 keys, but you're right about one thing, stability and earthquakes. That's what elections are all about. And here's an uncanny alliance between a Russian and an American to predict American elections. And in today's day, this might be just the Russian interference
Exactly.
that has become just so, what should I say, unpopular.
Yeah, well, Kailas Borak sadly has passed away many years ago. So it's just me right now.
Okay, so just the American, no Russian hand.
No Russian left.
So you predicted Kamala Harris as being the favorites, winning the elections, and you based these on the 13 keys. Give us a sense of how do you come up with these 13 keys, and how do you scientifically predict elections based on this?
As I indicated, we came up with the keys empirically by studying every election from 1860 to 1980 and discovering the patterns that separated earthquake from stability. And the keys differ from the pundits. Pundits are fun, but they have no scientific basis for their opinion. They differ from the polls. Polls are snapshots, but they're abused as predictors by clerks who compile polls like Nate Silver, who tell you Hillary Clinton had a 70 to 80% chance of winning in 2016. Then she loses, and he says, see, I told you she had a 20% plus chance of losing. it's meaningless. Never can be right, can never be wrong. So the keys are based upon the insight that it's governing, not campaigning, that counts. And you can only predict elections not by looking at the day-to-day polls or the swings in the campaign, but by the strength and performance of the White House party. And that is what the keys gauge according to a simple decision rule.
So many people say that life in Biden's time means more inflation and, real incomes going down, home mortgages going up. So that's part of governance. What is your key, one of the 13 keys, talk about this?
Those are talking points, of course. The Democrats would counter inflation is down from 9% to 2.5%. The stock market is booming. Employment. So, I don't listen to these talking points. I'll tell you what my 13 keys are and how it works. Midterm elections, incumbency, contests for the incumbent party, third parties, 2 economic keys, short and long-term economy, policy change, social unrest scandal, foreign/military failure and success, and only 2 keys have anything to do with the candidates, and they're very high threshold keys. They ask whether these candidates are the once-in-a-generation, across-the-board, transformational, inspirational candidates. And the way it works, these are all phrased as true-false questions, where an answer of true favors the White House party. If 6 or more of the keys are false, the White House party loses. You have earthquake, fewer than 6, stability.
Okay, so in this case, how many keys are right for Kamala Harris and how many are wrong for her, which will decide Donald Trump's future?
Exactly. So the way I look at it is, how many negative keys are there? Are there 6 or more or fewer than 6? And right now I have her losing 4. The mandate key, because the Democrats lost U.S. House seats in 2022. That's what it's based on. Incumbency, because once Biden dropped out, no longer a sitting president running. But she doesn't lose the party internal battle key because everyone united around her. Democrats suddenly got smart. So that's 2. 3, the incumbent charisma key. She's not a Franklin Roosevelt yet, a truly transformational candidate. And 4, foreign policy failure. Gaza is a terrible failure, a humanitarian disaster with no end in sight. I know the U.S. doesn't have boots on the ground, but we have very, very serious commitments in the Middle East. So that's 4. A possible 5th would be foreign policy success. But I give that to the Biden administration because it was Biden and Biden alone who put together the coalition of the West that stopped Putin from conquering Ukraine and then turning on America's NATO allies. And Biden's continuing support has enabled Ukraine to survive for more than 2.5 years and even make incursions into Russia. This will go down as an historic presidential achievement. So that's only 4 keys down. Take 6 to count Harris out. That's why I'm saying, based on history, we are going to have a new path-breaking president. Kamala Harris will become the first female woman president of the United States, at least cracking, if not shattering, the glass ceiling, and the first American president of African and East Asian descent, kind of foreshadowing where America's going. We're becoming a majority-minority country. We're no longer a white person's country.
No longer a white person's country. But what would you say about the foreign policy hits and misses that the Republicans talk about, which is Afghanistan, the pullout, the manner in which that happened, leaving a gaping hole right there in terms of the foreign policy, China's entry there. What about the fact that many people feel that Ukraine-Russia is a new war that didn't take place in Trump's time but took place in Biden's time? So just that conquering Ukraine hasn't been possible. The fact that the war seems to not being ending anytime soon, how do you see that in terms of your keys?
You know, the parties have all their talking points, and I don't listen to the talking points. On Afghanistan, you have 2 totally conflicting reports. coming out of the Congress, one by Republicans, one by Democrats. But it doesn't matter because I already counted the foreign policy failure key against the White House party.
So the details don't matter.
Don't matter. I already turned that key. And even if you want to quarrel with me that Ukraine's been a success, don't think that's quarrelsome. That would still be only 5 keys down, still 1 key short of having Trump return to the White House.
What do you think about the fact that there have been 2 assassination attempts on former President Donald Trump, and do you think that can create a bit of a sympathy wave for him?
You know, my favorite comedian is the late, great Gilda Radner, whose character, Rosanna Dana, was famous for saying, "There's always something." Every 4 years, some critic comes to me and says, "You got to change your key. We have a unique situation. We have an African American running, 2008. Never had that before. America's not ready for an African American. We have a woman running. We have a candidate who admitted on tape that he sexually assaults women, that he grabs them by their private parts. Surely he's finished. Got to change your key." Had I changed my keys in response to these events of individual elections, I would have been wrong a number of times. The keys are the northern star of prediction because they're based on the big picture of the incumbent party's governance. They don't change very easily. A big myth, maybe the biggest myth of American politics, is the so-called October surprise. Doesn't exist. I've made my predictions before that, and they've all been right, and I've never changed them in 40 years.
Oh my God. Would that make Donald Trump a little antsy, a little defensive in his campaign, hearing it from you?
He might be, you never know. You know, after the 2016 election, when I was virtually alone in predicting Donald Trump, which I said did not make me very popular in Democratic D.C., I actually got a note which said, "Congrats, Professor, good call," and signed in big Sharpie letters, Donald J. Trump.
This time, have you got a letter?
No, I don't think I'll get one this time.
No? Not from him, not from Kamala Harris?
Well,
either?
maybe. But, you know, Trump is a showman, so.
Not yet.
Not yet. I've got that one note. It's on the wall of my office.
Okay, amazing. And what, no keys for who's the best debater in the presidential debates?
Debates have no bearing, no predictive value. Hillary Clinton won all the debates and still lost. John Kerry in 2004 won the debates against that terrible debate of George W. Bush, still lost. You cannot predict an election based upon any of the events of the campaign. No one has ever developed a track record of elections by trying to do that. You would have predicted a landslide for Hillary Clinton based on the campaign. And of course, most of the pundits were predicting a Clinton win, as were all the pollsters.
Well, so in these debates, the pollsters are giving an edge to Kamala Harris. You don't take that very seriously?
I do not, unless this is the beauty of a system that's based on 160 years of history and doesn't change. Unless something changes a key, it has no impact on my system. And debates don't change a key, except, of course, you had the extraordinary situation with Biden stepping down, and that was fully accounted for by the keys. Democrats lost the incumbency key, right? Because but they retained the contest key because they united behind Harris. And Harris may have helped the Democrats retain the third party key because voters didn't have to choose anymore between 2 old white guys. Hate saying that, being an old white guy myself, and I think that contributed to the fizzling of RFK Jr., saving the third party key. I also think she contributed to saving the social unrest key because the protests had been directed against Biden, and he's now kind of back in the shadows, and it's Harris who's out front. So these extraordinary events this year are fully accounted for by the keys. But if they don't change a key, they have no impact.
But there's still 6 weeks to go for the elections. And do you think anything could change between now and then? Or are your keys now set in stone?
My keys have never changed this late. That said, I'm not Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, who claims he's got a pipeline to the Almighty. I'm not psychic Gene Dixon with a crystal ball. My predictions are based on history. They're very robust because they cover 160 years of enormous changes in our society, our demography, our economics, and our politics. But could something occur that's so unprecedented, so cataclysmic, that it breaks the pattern of 160 years? Possibly, but it hasn't happened, and you would never know until after it happens. As I said, if I listen to the people who every 4 years are telling me I got to change my system because something is different, I would have made a pile of errors.
So let me ask you, if you're saying nothing's going to change, and if you're saying that Kamala Harris is as good as in the White House, people might start asking you to predict wars, how they take place, when they take place, pandemics, and other challenges. Have you ever considered doing that?
Yeah. I've been asked basically two things. One, to predict elections in other countries, including India. I was asked that when I was lecturing in India. I don't remember.
How many years ago?
This was like 10 years ago or something. So
it's very important that you say this. Which side asked you for
I don't remember. It didn't mean anything to me.
You do.
I do not.
You do. You're just keeping a
too
secret.
Old. No, I have no secrets. Everything that I know, I'm willing to say right out in the middle of the AU Quad for everyone to hear. So what I told the people in India was, no, you can't just take the keys and export them to India. But someone like you, who's an expert in Indian history, Indian politics, and quantitative methods, could use the methodology and the approach and develop keys to Indian politics. I can't do it, but an expert on India could. The other thing I've been asked was to develop keys for gambling.
For gambling?
Gambling, horse racing.
Never been tempted to do that?
I don't want to wind up with cement overshoes in the bottom of the Potomac River. I don't want to deal with the gambling industry.
Okay.
So I've turned that down.
But, the bane of predictions of elections by pollsters in every single country has been the fact that data analysis and some of the assumptions that people do in forecasting very often go wrong.
Yes. Let me tell you about the polls. Aside from the fact that they're snapshots and abused as predictors, there are other issues. The pollsters tell you our error is about plus and minus 3%. You've all heard that. That's pure statistical error. That's sampling error. That's the error you would get if you had a huge jar of green and red balls and you pulled out a sample to estimate the percentage of green and red balls in the jar. But human beings are not green and red balls. They don't answer pollsters' questions. They may lie. They may not have focused on the election and will change their minds. Plus, we don't know how anyone's voted yet. So the pollsters have to guess at who the likely voters are. And every pollster has a different way of guessing. That piles on non-statistical error on top of the plus and minus 3%. And it's not random, it's unidirectional. So in 2016, we know the pollsters underestimated Republican voting strength. So like generals fighting the last war, they've tried to correct that, and now they're underestimating Democratic voting strength. Democrats are outperforming the polls by 5+ points. Have you heard of George Santos, the disgraced member of Congress who was booted out? The most prominent special election was for his congressional seat in New York. A poll taken like a couple of days before the election, on the eve of the election, had the Democrat ahead by 1 point. He won by 8 points, outperforming the polls by 7 points.
So you're saying voters still have to come out and cast their votes. Polls will do what they will do, but you have rested your case with a predicted victory for Kamala Harris, and you're not revisiting that decision anytime soon?
That's right. Take the pundits and the pollsters, and they're my buddies, nothing against them personally, but take their predictions and do with those predictions what the great philosopher David Hume said you should do to works of superstition: consign them to the flames.
consign them to the flames is right. But don't you want to collect another letter from Donald Trump?
Since I'm predicting his defeat, I tend to doubt it.
And a new one from Kamala Harris?
Anything is possible.
Is it on its way?
I haven't seen it yet. I wouldn't know.
You, any last minute thoughts on relooking? I'm asking you that again because people are known to change their minds.
Yeah. My last minute thought is forget the pundits, forget the pollsters, keep your eye on the big picture that it's governing, not campaigning, that counts, as gauged by the keys to the White House.
Says Allan Lichtman. At 77, never afflicted by a second thought?
You know what? I'm 77. I've been doing this for 40 years. And every 4 years, I make half the country really, really mad at me. And of course, my predictions are predictions, not endorsements. They're totally nonpartisan. I've predicted the two most conservative presidents of our time, Ronald Reagan and Donald Trump, along with liberals like Barack Obama and Kamala Harris. So there's nothing to do with my own political views whatsoever, but I do get butterflies in my stomach still at age 77, knowing.
Waiting for the 5th of November.
Exactly, knowing if I fall off that limb, a lot of people will be very happy.
Well, we'll wait and watch, and on 5th of November, remember you have a date with an Indian channel, and on Times Now we'd like to hear from you whether you're celebrating your 13 keys, or are we rewriting, how to predict elections in a totally new model? I guess we'll know that, but I want you to reconsider just one thing, and it's a request from 1.4 billion people back home in India. Please form some sort of a model to predict Indian elections.
You find an expert, and I'll give him the method.
Fantastic. Thank you, Allan Lichtman. Thank you very much for speaking with me. And frankly, it was a delight to speak with you. And the Nostradamus, once again, 11th time?
This is my 11th call.
11th call. Well, we'll be watching, and so will every Indian be watching this. And we'll be back and we'll engage with you on the 5th of November.
You know where to find me.
Absolutely, here at the American University. Pleasure speaking with you, and we'll be back soon.
Take care.
Thank you very much, and thank you, viewers, for joining me on this very special episode here from Washington, D.C.